27001 2022 lead implementer. And before starting, let me explain what is the purpose of this session or the awareness session about the ISO 27001 2022 lead implementer. Right now, many entities are looking to implement ISO 27001, and people or there is a let's call it a concern about, is it hard to implement ISO 27001? And if I take the ISO 27001 lead implementer, does it make me qualified to implement the ISO in my organization? So the purpose of this workshop is to understand what is the lead implementer, and to be more accurate is to understand how to implement ISO 27001 2022 in any organization. And then what is the role of lead implementer? What I am expecting from your side after this session is to have a clear understanding about the implementation and to understand exactly what kind of skills you need to have and what is the challenge when it comes to implementing ISO 27001. So this will be very suitable for people who are planning to implement ISO 27001, the new version, which is 2022, and they don't know from where to start. For people who want to take a lead implementer, but they don't know exactly this will help us in which way. I mean, whoever will take the training, the lead implementer training, will be qualified to implement the framework in any organization. And what are the different phases of implementation, and what are the common challenge in the ISO 27001. The session will be around 1 hour, and then we'll take a few questions. And we're going to talk about the standard, what is ISO 27001, what is the benefit for any organization to get this certification, what is the role of the lead implementer, because a lot of people have some confusion about that. Then we're going to talk about understanding the ISMS, Information Security Management System, the different phases of implementing ISO 27001, documentation, and we're going to talk about training and awareness. And finally, we're going to talk about preparing the certification and the challenge we are facing whenever we implement this standard in any organization. And I kept like 10 minutes by the end of the session for any question. Now, keep in mind that you need to have a clear scope when it comes to this session is related to what. Allow me just 1 second. I think I have a problem. Okay. So we will also share some of the documentations that we are using in the ISO implementation, just to give you a better understanding about this framework and how exactly it gets implemented in different kinds of organizations. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Mohammed Atif. I'm a cybersecurity consultant. I hold the PhD in crypto analysis. I have more than 20 years of experience in cybersecurity, and most of my experience was in the field of standard and compliance implementation. I worked in different technical projects as well. However, recently, most of the projects that we are getting in InfoSec4TC are standard and compliance implementation. And this is very, very important to consider. I'm also the founder of InfoSec4TC. It's a cybersecurity services platform. Just try to... And I worked in many ISO 27001, the previous version, 2013, and the new version, and similar kind of standard and compliance like GDPR and HIPAA and NIST and ISR and so on. I'm sorry about this alarm. It will get off by itself. So let's start by talking about ISO 27001 2022. What is the ISO standard exactly? So ISO 27001 is an international certification or framework that is provide a framework to be implemented in your organization to be able to secure all kinds of information and services. Okay, I don't want to spend long time explaining the framework because actually I believe since you decided to attend this workshop, you know what is exactly ISO 27001. But what I would like to highlight on is that first, the ISO 27001 2022 is based on risk approach, which means that the main content or the core of the ISO is to be able to identify the information asset and what are the risks associated to it. If you know how to do that, you will not have any problem implementing ISO 27001. So it's a risk-based approach, which means you need to understand how to manage information security risk or cybersecurity risk. This is the first point that you need to keep in mind before we start. The second point is that the ISO is applicable on any kind of organization, because there was some thought earlier that only big organizations need to implement the standard and need to get the ISO certification. No, regardless of your organization side, any organization is applicable to implement ISO 27001. So it's not only for big or medium organization, any size of organization, especially right now. A lot of business are online business, and they are very small business that deal with the online services. And they think we don't need to implement ISO. Actually, those are more in need for implementing the ISO 27001. So any kind of business, physical, online, need to implement that. And there is one very good reason behind that. Okay. The benefit of getting the certification as an organization, of course, it will increase the confidence in your organization. It will let people trust you. You will be able to have a framework that secure all your information. It prevents you from having any legal issue, because if any data get breached or leaked or stolen, it may end up with legal problems. So there is a lot of benefits that we can talk about. But let me tell you the realistic benefit behind the ISO 27001. Right now, most of the business are following specific compliance. For example, we are located here in Dubai, UAE. Dubai, we are following a standard called ISR. It's not a standard, it's a government compliance, which means it's mandatory to be implemented. If you are in US and you are following a standard, for example, like NEST or PCI DSS, or if you are following a standard like ECC, a lot of business right now are following legal requirement when it comes to privacy and securing the customer information and securing the system and so on. And the compliance that you are following is mandatory. When you implement ISO 27001, most of the time you fulfill the compliance requirement. So for example, in many projects that we conducted to implement ISO, the project was not just to implement ISO for this organization, but also to fulfill some of the requirement of GDPR, because it's a compliance, government compliance, and it has to be implemented. So just by implementing the ISO, you fulfill the compliance requirement, and you fulfill the government and legal requirement for this organization. That's why there is a big demand right now for organization to implement the ISO 27001, because it fulfills the compliance requirement. And keep in mind, if you know how to do that, this will be a big advantage, which is how can I implement the ISO and then map the ISO with another standard. Let me show you an example just to have a clear understanding about what I'm talking about. Yeah. So for example, if an entity are holding or are getting payment online and saving or storing credit card information, which means this entity need to follow a standard called PCI DSS, right? And PCI DSS is a standard that was issued or released by credit card company, right? So they have to implement all the control of PCI DSS. Okay. But if this organization already implement ISO 27001, you will notice that there is a mapping between the ISO controls and the PCI DSS. So if you can see, this is the document explaining the ISO control. This is the ISO control, and what are the similar control in the PCI DSS. So if the company already has the ISO 27001 implemented, most of the PCI DSS control are already implemented, and this is a compliance, which means it's mandatory. ISO is optional. Any organization can apply for ISO, and they can get the certificate if they comply with the requirement or not. But this is mandatory. So implementing the ISO 27001 will fulfill any compliance that you are following, financially, if you are in the healthcare, if you are a government entity, and so on. So keep that in mind, that most of the ISO project will end up be mapped with another governance compliance. So this is a very big advantage. And it's also reflecting that the cybersecurity framework and standard has a lot of similarity. So this is mainly the benefit of having the ISO 27001-2022. Now, before talking about the responsibility of the lead implementer, I mean, if you're going to be the one who want to implement the ISO 27001, you need to understand this framework include what? Is it only technical control? I mean, if you want to be ISO certified as a company, I just need to install an antivirus and assign a password on my systems and maintain the logs. Is it only like that? It's not actually. The ISO 27001 is divided to 4 different domains, and this is the new version. It's not really new, but it was released on October 2022. So it consists of 4 different domains. This is the ISO document, as you can see. Let me show it to you. And this standard include 4 different domains. Sorry. Okay. The document is not a really big document. The standard is around 26 pages, right? But it includes 4 different domains, and those domains are the organizational control, the people controls, technical control, and physical control. Okay. And this is different than the previous ISO. The previous ISO, which was 27001 2013, included 14 domains: access control, incident management, operational security. So there was 14 domains, and each domain includes some controls. But in the new version, there was 4 main domains: the organizational controls, the people controls, the physical control, and the technical control or technology control. And each domain includes few controls that is related to the domain. For example, the organizational control will include controls like the organization need to have an inventory of all the information assets. The organization need to have a set of policies. The organization need to have a management commitment for the information security or a governance that they are following. People control, for example, related to people need to have awareness. People need to know about the policies that they are following. You need to conduct a background check whenever anyone gets hired. Physical control is quite clear. Controls that will secure the physical location or the premises. And technical control, which is the antivirus, the threat intelligence, the DLP implementation, and so on. So the new ISO become very, very organized. But if you see exactly, or if you analyze those controls, you will understand that it's not a technical framework. And even if you compare between the current ISO and the previous ISO, you will notice that the name of the ISO, the name of the standard has been changed. It's now become, it used to be information technology, and now it's become information security, cyber security, and privacy. Okay. Which means it's not only about technical control. And this is the challenge, because a lot of people who start the implementation or start considering that they will do the implementation for ISO 27001 are coming from a technical background. So technical is only 30% or maybe 25% of the controls. But you have other controls, for example, policy and procedures. You have controls related to HR, like the process of hiring people or the process of terminating people or the process of the awareness. You have controls related to senior management. Okay, this is usually the gap that people are facing if they came from a technical background and they consider, I want to learn how to implement ISO 27001. Okay, and it's not really hard, but you need to understand, as an ISO 27001 lead implementer, you are not responsible only for the IT department. You are responsible to coordinate between all the departments and to explain to each department what is their responsibility in this framework and to provide them with the policy, with the templates. This is the real challenge. And honestly speaking, it's not really a challenge. I mean, if you understand how it's done, it should be quite easy, simple. But you need to understand that it's not just to implement few technical controls, and then you will end up getting all the requirement of ISO, and then you can request an external audit to get the certification. Okay. In total, we have 93 controls in the new ISO. In the previous versions, there was 114 controls divided in 14 domains. But now we have 93 controls divided in 4 different domains. This is the ISO 27001. Let's go back to the document itself, the standard itself. As you can see, this is the ISO standard, okay? And it's a 26-page document. It's divided to 2 different parts. The clauses, we have, the clauses is usually explaining some definitions, and we have the Annex A. And the Annex A is quite important because this is the part that include all the control. So if we go to the Annex A page part, and check, as you can see, you will find all the control divided. You have the organizational control, which include all the things related to organization. We need to have a set of policy and procedures. We need to have a role and responsibility related to information security, separation of duty. Then we have the people controls. And people control will be into the awareness part, will be into the process of hiring, which is mainly an HR responsibility. So as you can see, this is the people control. You need to conduct a background check for anyone who joins the organization. Are you the one who's doing that? No, you are not the one who's doing that. The process of a lead implementer, you need to understand this process, how it should be done, who is responsible to implement it, prepare the policy, prepare the procedures, prepare any templates that will be used, and then sit with the concerned department, which is, in this case, the HR department. Guys, from now on, whoever get hired, here is how the process should be done, and then audit them. Okay. So it's very high level document, but the control is a very straightforward. What you need to do, you need to know how we implement that in a real organization. For example, if we take the first control in the standard, which is creating an information security policy, okay, it's just a couple of lines. But how can I do that in a real organization? This is what you need to learn. Okay, how we are doing it, how the policy should be written. We create policy based on what? This is what you need to learn as a lead implementer. So this is take us in the role of lead implementer. Okay, the lead implementer is the one responsible for implementing all this control. You need to understand this control is doing what exactly, what is the purpose behind the control, how it's done, what is the proper document to be used, which department are responsible for the implementation. You train the people, and then you make sure that the process is getting followed in a proper way. Okay, so it's not hard as you think. You just need to expand your scope. It's not just a technical control where there is technical control to be implemented, antivirus, threat intelligence, backup, log management. This is all included. However, it's part of the framework. It's not only the technical part of it. And as a lead implementer, the first step we usually do when it comes to implementing the ISO is to conduct a gap assessment. When we get a project like that, we don't start by just, we don't start by start the implementation right away. Taking the standard and check the first control, how I do it, the second control, how I do it. It's not like that. Usually the first process in any standard implementation, ISO or PCI or any other standard, is to conduct a gap analysis. Okay. And the gap analysis will let you know about the organization security posture. I mean, how many control is already in place? Sometimes we implement that, even if the company is not ISO certified, they may have another certificate or another standard, and some of the control are already in place. Okay. And this is an example of a gap analysis that you should conduct as an information, a lead implementer. You get all the control in a doc, Excel sheet or an application, and you start checking control by control, and it's divided according to the domains. So for example, information asset management, incident management. So you start checking each domain by domain. Is it implemented in the concerned department or not? Okay, we do that for each department according to what are the applicable controls on those departments. I will check. Okay, is this department are following this process? Yes or no? And I will check the evidence. This is before starting the implementation. Is it compliant, partially compliant, non-compliant? And I will select the state and I will write my comment. And I have to do that for all the 93 controls before I start. The applicable control, because some control should not be applicable on some of the organization. So I need to have an understanding before I start. Is there some control already in place from another standard, from another compliance, from a best practice or not? Because I don't want to repeat work. I don't want to spend effort twice. And by doing that in all the domains, this is actually with the old ISO 27001, but it's a concept of by going domain by domain in each department according to the applicability, I will end up having a clear picture about the amount of effort that will be done. How many controls should be implemented in each domain? How many control is already implemented from my audit? How many control is partially implemented, which means it's implemented but missing something? And finally, how many control is not in place? Having this gap analysis will really give me a clear understanding about this project will take how much time. It will give me a clear understanding about the teams that I need, because a lot of effort will be done from my side as a lead implementer, but more effort will be done from the department. So when I do that, when I write a report like that, and I'm writing in each domain or each control, what is the status of this control in this department, and I send it to the department, they will know exactly what needs to be done from their side and what needs to be done from my side, because the implementation of this framework is not one person job. You know, you have the lead implementer, he's coordinating between the department, preparing the policy, preparing the procedures, the templates, the process, and explaining that to the department, explaining that to the employee, and follow up with the implementation. So if you don't get this kind of cooperation from other departments, things will not be going smoothly as you may expect. So when we implement the ISO, we don't start by the implementation. We have to conduct the gap assessment. And this is not just in ISO, in any standard, you have to do that. It will give you a clear understanding about the current situation. Once we do that, then we will move to two different phases related to the asset identification and risk, which you're going to talk about it. But then I'm also responsible on what I just wrote in LED, the training of the staff. Implementing the ISMS is not really a big deal. And if you have experience, and regardless of the size of your organization, you can implement it in 3-4 weeks, because it's all templates, all documentation. But if you're going to end up with few documents, set of policy, set of SOAP, set of procedures, and that's it, disaster recovery plan, business impact analysis, just few set of documents and that's it, useless. The main challenge is to train people how to follow the policy. You train each department what is their responsibility in the framework. You train the employee to follow the policy. If you are using the company email, there is a policy called email security policy. You have to read it and understand how to follow it. You need to explain to the management how we're gonna measure the effectiveness of the controls. We have KPIs to measure. You need to explain to the IT department what is the role and responsibility. So if you're going to spend 30% of your time in the implementation, you're going to spend 70% of your time training people and solving problems. Okay, this is what you need to keep in mind. The implementation is not hard because it's just set of documents, but to enforce the implementation, this is usually the challenge. So this is your role as a lead implementer, is to understand and implement the ISMS. And the ISMS is the framework that will qualify you to get the ISO 27001. So we don't implement the ISO. The ISO is the name of the certificate, but what you implement is the information security management system. This is what you learn to implement, which is a framework that will maintain and manage the security of all your information. Information could be services, could be applications, could be devices, could be even people is considered information asset. And to be able to do that, you need to be familiar with two different activities. This is the core of the ISMS, the ones that I wrote in red. The information asset identification and the information risk. This is exactly what we are doing, guys. We identify what is the information asset of this organization, what information they have. If I don't know this company, what kind of information they have, how should I secure them? How should I protect them? But if I know that this companies, they have a list of all the customer information and all their personal information, which is a subject of privacy. The company have some services that they provide to their customers. They have some configuration of some devices. They have some financial transaction information. I need to identify the information asset. This is one of the main challenges. And actually, this is the main challenge, to be honest, because identifying the information asset, according to that, I will build whatever is coming. I will identify what risk is associated with that. And then I will decide about the security controls that I need to do to mitigate those risks. The problem is identifying the information asset. It's not done by me because each department has different kind of information. HR, finance, contract and purchase, IT. The problem is I need to gather those information from department. And this is a really big challenge. You get resistance, people are not free. But if you don't do those two steps, which is first identifying the information asset and then identifying the risk associated, you will not be able to implement the ISMS in a proper way. Okay. So this is the main component of the ISMS, is based on identifying the information asset, and those information asset has different shapes. It could be Excel sheets and Word files. It could be databases. It could be computers. It could be routers. It could be services that the organization provides for their customer, mobile application, web application. You need to identify that. All details related to the service, the criticality of those information, the sensitivity, the owner of the information, the custodian. And once you are able to do this step, then you can move to the second step, which is identifying the risk. Because when it comes to implementing security controls, it's, as I mentioned in the beginning, is based on risk. Okay? If you have a laptop, it has a very, very sensitive information. It has some customer information or some personal information, social security number, date of birth, some very sensitive information. But this computer, for example, is not exposed to the internet, is isolated, it doesn't have a USB to be plugged any USB. It has very limited connectivity and isolated. Okay, you will not spend much time or effort or money to secure the machine because the amount of risk is low. But if you have the same machine, it's connected to the internet, the user can browse the internet, can download something, he have a couple of USB ports, the risk is different here. It's the same machine with the same information, but the risk is different. So we need to learn how to identify the risk associated to the information. Now, is it a hard topic? I mean, do I need to be an expert in risk? Do I need to take some risk management training? It's important. I mean, it will be useful, I mean, but actually it's not. There is a standard that we are following when it comes to managing risk. If you read the standard, you will be able to manage risk, at least initially, in a good way, which is the ISO 27005. So don't think that the standard will keep you to your knowledge or to your background. Actually, there is a document for everything. We have the ISO 27002 that explain all the control. We have the ISO 27005 that explain how to manage risk. So if you know how the framework, if you know the set of ISO, if you know the process, you can manage to implement ISO inside your organization. Okay. And I'm always, because I worked in many projects of ISO 27000 implementation, and I always notice that in many entities, they will decide to get a third party or a contractor or an external company to let them do the ISO for them. While I always recommend to have an internal team to be trained on the implementation, and the company team is one who implements the ISO. Because as you know, the ISO is not a lifetime certificate, it's a 3-year certificate. So whatever the companies that you hired will do, you're gonna have to maintain that. And then you're gonna have to renew the certificate. And then, so having the internal people knowing in your company how to implement ISO will save you a lot of effort and a lot of time. Okay. So as I mentioned, you know, the ISMS implementation, which is the core of the ISO, this is the framework that you need to implement to be able or to be qualified to be ISO certified. It's mainly depend on, first, you need to have a set of information security policy, and then you need to, and the policy, we create the policy based on compliance requirement and risk. So whatever inside the standard that I need to make it a policy to be followed, I need to create a risk for it, okay? And then we need to identify all our information asset. This is really the task that take a lot of effort because it's done by a different team and you have to follow up with them, and it's really kind of not easy to it's not hard, it just has a dependency. You have to push people and escalate to management. This is what we usually face, especially in big organization. In small, this will be quite easy. And then conduct or manage the risk associated to this information. And according to the risk that you get, you will get a risk treatment plan, and then you will mitigate all the control from the ISMS. This is a very high-level explanation about how we are implementing the ISMS to be qualified to the ISO. And this is the phases of implementation. First, you need to identify the scope. Are you implementing ISO on all the organization? Are you implementing ISO in a specific department? In all the organization with the branches? Is it only for the, I mean, you need to identify the scope of the implementation, and then you will start assess the risk. You cannot do a risk assessment unless you have a proper asset identification, and then you will provide the risk treatment plan. Usually this is provided by the company itself based on the budget, the allocated of resources. You do the ISMS documentation, and this is quite important because eventually the ISMS is a set of documents, okay? But documents that you can provide. Let me show you a project, ISO project deliverables. This is the set of deliverables that we provide in ISO. The ISMS scope, the ISMS policy, the gap assessment, the risk register, the asset registration, the report of penetration testing and vulnerability assessment. So all of those is a documentation that you deliver, but it's not like I'm writing document and I'm delivering them. No, it has to be provided, sorry, just 1 second. Implemented and followed. So if you have, for example, a risk assessment register, it doesn't mean that you just need to create a risk register and give it to the company or to your company. No, it has a risk treatment plan, and you have to start monitoring risk and monitoring the closure of the finding and so on. Okay. And then once you do the implementation of the ISMS, then you do an internal audit. So it's not enough to implement the control. Before requesting an external audit from the certification body to get certified, you have to conduct an internal audit to make sure that all the controls are implemented. And finally, you apply for the certification and you start monitoring the improvement of the ISMS. As I just mentioned, the implementation is not really hard. Just creating the set of policy, conducting gap analysis, risk register, asset register, and so on. But those policies that you will create, if you just create a few documents, or the business or disaster recovery planning, for example, if you just create the document and no one know about it, and then in case of any disaster, no one know about the restoration plan, it was not tested, or no one know about the policy in the organization. So if someone is using the email, he have no idea, any employee, that there is a policy controlling that, or a policy for using the internet of the company, or a policy for using the laptop of the company, and end up with the problems. So it's not really something that was implemented successfully. So the training is the most important part. As I told you, you spend more time explaining to people, explaining to employee, explaining to department champions, to management, each one role and responsibility. So this is actually what you need to explain. People need to understand that they have a policy that they are following. This is like an administrative law, okay? And by doing that, you minimize human error. You make people more committed to the business, understanding that there is a restriction when it comes to using the business, understand that the information that they are dealing with, the files that he's dealing with, or the database, is his own responsibility. If this information gets leaked or stolen or published on the internet, he will be the one who will be held responsible for that. Management need to also understand their responsibility. They need to push their employee in different departments. Talk about functional management and senior management. So each department management, if they are not the one who ask or who push the employee to attend the awareness for the information security workshop, or to nominate 2 champions to be responsible for the security of the department, no one will comply. When you communicate with the department and show that with the management and show them that there is KPI to measure the effectiveness of the controls, and we have a target KPI, and we are every quarter or monthly or annually, we are measuring how are we standing. Management will understand that this is a governance requirement, because honestly speaking, management don't really care about security, but they care about legal issue. So they know that if you implement the proper security control, if you follow the standard, if you comply with the regulation, you will prevent the company from getting into legal issue. This is what management they are looking for. They want to make sure that you are utilizing the security budget in a best way. So you spend on the things that has higher risk more than the things that doesn't have risk or have very low risk, for example. Okay. So the awareness and the knowledge part is very, very, very important in the ISMS implementation. Finally, what are the challenges when it comes to implementing the ISO implementation? The first challenge, and if any of you guys work in a project like that, he would really understand what I'm talking about, is resistance from the employee. You know, you ask people or department to fill the asset register, no one cares. You give them a survey for a business impact analysis, no one reply back. You ask them that you want to conduct a restoration testing for ID department, they said we have something more important to do. So business resistance is always the main challenge, okay? And this can only be solved by management support, because management need to initiate the process of ISMS implementation. If management will not support you, this will never end. Okay. So people, they don't want to be overloaded. They do what they do. They don't want to have other activity related to other department or other section. So this is one of the main problem. But again, most of this problem will be solved if you get the management support. That's why whenever we start a project like that, we start by requesting the management support. If we don't get that, this will not be done. It has to be announced from the senior management office that we are implementing an ISMS. To be qualified to get ISO, all departments need to cooperate with the project manager. Okay, and whenever you face a problem, you have to escalate right away. We are not very popular in any organization. Everyone hates us because we are not really flexible. If I'm requesting the asset register and it gets delay, I send one email, I'm calling the champion from department, he's not replying back, I will escalate it. Okay. Otherwise, I will take the full responsibility for that. The other challenge will be the lack of resources, the lack of expertise, the lack of technology. And this is not actually something that can be solved easy. It may affect the timeline of the project. It may affect how long it will take. However, management can support as well. But right now, I think some of the problem related to the previous expertise or to the previous knowledge with the involvement of, or with the improvement of the third-party application available and the resources, and keep in mind also the growing of AI, I think this will not be really a problem right now. But still, organization with the limitation of budget or resources may take longer time, but it will not really stop the project from completing. Also, the management commitment and buy-in and stakeholder buy-in, this is a big factor in the implementation, because it's not just the senior management or the CEO or whoever is in charge, but each department management, I need their support. I need information from all the departments. I need to make sure all the departments are implementing the policies that we created. I need to make sure that all people are attending the awareness session to understand that there is policy to follow. There is responsibility, role and responsibility related to each department and each person. So the management and the stakeholder buy-in also is a big factor in the implementation. This was a brief explanation about the lead implementer role and the ISO 27001 and how it should be implemented and what are the main challenge and the main element of the ISMS implementation. And I'm open for any question. Feel free to open your mic and raise any question you have. And if you felt that it was kind of informative, we can do more session about that, but for specific activity, talking about risk management, how it's done, or talking about asset management, or talking about any specific topic, if you feel that this was kind of informative. I'm not checking the chat, so if you can open, let me see. Yeah, I can see a few questions here. Yes, we provide the lead implementer training, ISO 27001 lead implementer. To qualify, we provide lead implementer and lead auditor. But the lead implementer trainer, actually, we make it as much realistic as we can. Actually, it's a training with the exam, which means that you will take the training and you will get certified from a certification body. So yes, we provide that, and if this is needed for a team or something, you just can drop an email for this email, InfoSec4TC@infosec4tc.com. Okay. Is there any other question, guys? Okay. Any one of you are planning to implement ISO 27001, or he's already on the process, or he need to know more about the standard, any specific question, I'll be more than happy to answer them. You are very calm and silent for a lead implementer, so I hope you consider be more engaged. What I want to end up the session with that this is a growing requirement in the market. It's not related for a specific country. Worldwide is looking for people who want to implement or who know how to implement the ISMS and qualify organization for ISO. We are getting those requirements a lot and remotely. I mean, most of the jobs are done remotely. So if you are into the ISO lead implementer part, read more about it. There is a lot of resources online. There is a lot of resources on our platform. Dive into this subject more because it has a big demand on it. And more important, it's mapped with all the compliance or most of the compliance. So right now, any project we are getting, it's ISO implementation and mapping with another government compliance. So I hope it was informative and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.